there was another way of a struggle that was and has been and still is very important in Spain, and it's the fight against evictions. Well, as a result of the real estate cycle, of course, many families had to face incredible amounts of debt that couldn't be paid, so they were evicted. And in Spain, as a difference with the law here, is not only that you get evicted from your house, is that you keep your debts after you get evicted, right? So it's a complete catastrophe. If being evicted is bad enough, keeping your debts for life, it's certainly quite bad. So it was created a platform that was called PAH, Plataforma de Afectados por la Hipoteca, platform of those affected by mortgage. And on a one-by-one case, let's say going to the house of the people that was going to be evicted, a multitude of people physically went there and physically avoided the eviction, right? And this came to gain momentum, and actually made something very important, because at the end of the day, in European societies, and Spain is no exception, let's say that the public services are very, very well rated, right? Public education and public health, almost everyone, not even only left, but also quite a good number of people on the right, would consider that those are public conquests and are not to be given away, right? But the debt is a completely different matter, In our way of thinking, the debt is something that has to be unconditionally paid, because it's an individual problem of someone that has contracted, or has made a contract with the bank, and so it's their problem to have the debt. And the big win of this movement against eviction was to make a lot of people see that debt is a collective problem. It's a social problem. It is no longer an individual problem, an individual burden that you have to keep with you for life. Under certain conditions, debt is not exactly an option. It's just about the only way you can aspire to have a decent living, mostly for the working classes, right? And there was there has been another point in which the PA has been decisive, and it's because one of the problems of 15M, it was, as I told you before, it was that it was very middle class, declining middle class, right? Middle class that became in a way proletarianized, right? We found ourselves living by the day, right? We didn't know if we were, because jobs existed, but in a very temporary and precarious way. Maybe you had a job for 3 months, and then you went, your contract finished, and you didn't know what you were going to do afterwards. That's a very sort of proletarian feature, living by the day. You don't know what you're going to do. Even today, if you ask people in Spain, younger people particularly, what are you going to do? And they will tell you, I don't know. I don't really know if I'll be here, or if I'll have to go to Germany to find a job, or to the UK. I really have got no idea. But it was a middle class phenomenon, right? Whereas the movement against evictions was very much a working class movement, right? In which, of course, there were many activists that would come from middle class strata, but let's say that the communication was very, very, very fluid, right? And another thing, very important thing, it was a movement that covered the immigrants, which in Spanish cities, in the big cities, in Madrid and Barcelona, come to be 20% of the population. Depending on the district, it can be 25-30%. It's quite a lot. And this, in 15M, immigrants didn't feel it as their thing. We have to, as well, acknowledge that immigration in Spain is a very recent phenomenon, right? On the other hand, we were a country of migrants that went out of the country, in the 60s and the 50s. Plenty of Spaniards went to Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, to Mexico as well, Argentina, right? But we never didn't have a tradition of migrants coming in, and definitely migrants didn't feel 15M was a thing, among other things, because there is not even a second generation of migrants in Spain. There is a first one, right? And from the first generation to the second generation, politically the positions alter very much, right? The first generation is usually afraid of going into too many troubles in a land they don't feel their own. Yeah. So, but of course, and as well, the immigrants were the part of the population that was more in debt, right? So this apart from your political positioning was a life or death issue, right? So this affected a lot of people from that migrant groups, and at some point anyway, we sort of realized, or many people realized, that all these struggles were sort of getting to to their limit, right? We were arriving to what we call the glass ceiling, right? We were touching the limits of what could be done. And the state, at the end of the day, was controlled by the big sort of finance, political lines that were imposed from Europe, right? And didn't have to account very much in democratic terms to all those movements. It was a radically non-democratic government, right? So either the tides or the pa was getting, apart from the individual cases in which people actually weren't evicted from their house, which is a win enough, but in political terms, these movements weren't winning the battle, right? So there was, we felt the need that something had to be done in political institutional terms, right? I mean, we had to create a way to come to terms with the problem of power. Who was in power? Who was in the institutions at that moment? Who was deciding which were the public policies? And something had to be done in that field. Of course, it wasn't easy. Yeah.
Who is the we that you're referring to?
We, the movement. I say we because I felt, when I say we, it's because I think it was felt as a necessity by many people in different places, not a group of people that were actually cohesive, but many people struggling in very different points of the country will feel the same need. And when we came together and had the opportunity to talk, we saw that we all felt the same way. Like that's the we, the movement in general terms. Even people that wouldn't be called militant would feel that something had to be done in other political field, which is a field of the institutions, which of course isn't easy because we've been denied that part of politics for far too long, for 40 years. So it wasn't an easy step to take. And anyway, at that moment, there were two issues that were raised in a very sort of dramatic way. One was the need of what we call a constituent process. That is a word taken from the Latin American processes of Ecuador, Venezuela, Bolivia. When they win the battle against neoliberalism, the first thing to do is to create a constituent assembly that will decide on the new political order of the country, right? Of course, writing a new constitution, but that's a consequence. What has to be done is to rethink what kind of institutional setting or non-neoliberal institutional setting you want to live in. So that was one demand. And the other one, more in economical terms, was the demand for a democratic audit of the debt, right? To know which parts of to open the black box of debt and to see which parts are legitimate and which are not. This is a demand we share and we have taken for a great deal from the Greeks, which have always been an inspiration for this 15M movement, right? Even though there are differences, but it was felt that they were facing the same problem. And the democratic audit of debt is something we share as a demand with Greece. Of course, this was a movement previous to a democratic default on debt. That is, not to pay the parts of debt which are considered illegitimate, right? Both of them are very, very, very ambitious demands, right? Okay, so this is the panorama or the setting in which Podemos comes in, right? Podemos actually, their leadership is were people that have been in. Because I am in Podemos, but I have just sort of recently come to Podemos. There's people that were there from before, and they come from the Latin American experiences. These people that has been working in Venezuela, Bolivia, and Ecuador, and to a lesser extent, Argentina, right? But this and the fact that mostly the main visible face of Podemos, which is Pablo Iglesias, was and has been for a long time, quite a long time, going to political talk shows in the television. He was a well-known face, right? At that point, were the two sort of previous factors that they put into value in January 2013, right? And they sort of changed from the way we were seeing the relation between the political party and the movement, right? And they did it in a way it was done in Latin America, right? Because we, as people from the movements, believed that in order to get to the institutional political party politics, we had to reach something like a boiling point in the movements, right? We had to keep growing until, almost by a spontaneous force of the movement, a political party was formed. And they showed we were wrong. They did it in another way. It's the political party in itself is a way of generating movement when a situation has come to a halt, has come to an impasse, right? And that's what they did. They saw without having much support, just about 15, 20 people, most of them professors about my age, they just put the party forward, and that sort of creating a huge sort of backlash and impulse to what was the 15M movement. Almost immediately, the circles are like the local groupings of Podemos start just growing all over the country, right? And very soon they had like 800 circles in all the country, but very, 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 very soon, because it was all the political impulse from 15M getting there, because everyone felt that now the political phase is the one that Podemos had opened, right? So there they had a very, very strong points. They were, and that's a more polemical thing, they were populist. That's another thing they brought in from Latin America. I mean, they wanted to create a vast, let's say, majority of the people known as, in Spanish, as la gente, right? No el pueblo, because the people you have, when you say people, you have pueblo, which is more politically structured, and la gente in the same word. We differentiate. Gente is very, very abstract, right? Which is the majority, the social majorities that were being affected by it's more similar to the 99%, if you want. La gente is well, everyone that is not a multimillionaire, right? And against what they call the caste, and the caste being politicians, of course, and financiers in their alliance, both of them in their interests, which are minoritarian, and they face the vast majority of the people. That's like the political setting, right? This, of course, poses some problems in a Spanish society and in European society, because there are many, well, as here, there are many lines of fracture between that we call la gente, and you cannot totally ignore them. And that's and that's at the end has come to be a bit of a problem. But I will go back. I will go back to that.